Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today I wanted to give a little bit of a talk about the difference between, or the dynamics within civilizations, Huntingtonian civilizations, like the polarity between the idealism and pragmatism, the internal pragmatism, idealism, polarity of each civilization, and how they play out. I feel like this is an original contribution in the Huntingtonian school of geopolitics because it explains why when we try to talk about like intra-civilizational conflict and inter-civilizational conflict, why Huntington's model is almost perfect if you add this sort of understanding into it. So basically, I'm going to take the Islamic civilization as an example of all civilizations because it's the one I'm most familiar with, where on the extremes, right, on the pragmatic extreme and on the idealistic extreme, you have the people who are outside of the spectrum, who are hypocrites, who don't truly have faith in the fundamental presuppositions or principles of any given civilization. And so you have the hypocrites who, for pragmatic reasons or worldly interest or political interest, claim outwardly to belong to a particular civilization and have the identity that that civilization articulates in its anthropology. And then you have the people who are maybe on the extreme side of the spectrum, right? Extreme pragmatist or extreme idealist, who still remain faithfully within the spectrum, even though they're getting to the extremes, and are very distant from like a very authentic interpretation of the fundamental principles, right? So there's a distinction to be made of hypocrites who go outside of the spectrum on both sides, right? So, for example, on the pragmatic extreme, and so this takes account for like people make criticisms of like the Huntingtonian model because it says things like, well, why did Kuwait give America bases to attack Iraq from? Or why did Pakistan cooperate in the invasion of Afghanistan when these are all countries that are within the Islamic civilization, right? So that sort of criticism, why sometimes certain elements within a civilization tend to align with an outside civilization. For example, the dominant civilization like America has been, or Anglo-Protestant civilization, and its extreme pragmatic or extreme leftist, idealistic, extreme leftist, progressive, liberal, globalist sort of element within Anglo-Protestant civilization. Why? Why? Elements of other civilizations have taken the side of this foreign civilization against people within their own civilization? And the answer is, first off, you have to consider the extremes where like there are people who claim to be within a civilization for pragmatic reasons, but are actually hypocrites. So for example, like the Kuwait royal family, or these people, or the Saudi royal family also, you could say in a way, which claim for the basis of their political legitimacy to be Muslim, but often take the side of a foreign civilization against the interest of their own civilization as a whole and other elements within that civilization, right? And that's the point where there are people within every civilization who are hypocrites, who claim to be adherents or participants in the first principles of that civilization, but they're not. So for example, on the political side, so this is like the politician, right, where they're really looking out for their own interests and they don't have really a sense of commitment to any first principles of any kind, right? These are sophists, right? And on the other side, when you have the idealistic extreme, the people outside of the spectrum are people who are causing sectarianism, because even though there are various interpretive traditions, like for the Shia and the Sunni within Islamic civilization, the first principles are fairly common enough where, according to the principles of the religion itself, you shouldn't be killing one another or, engaging in over sectarian public dialect or dialogue or monologuing about sectarian things in public very strongly, right? And so, but these people, in order to maintain, like, for the Protestant, bishop to maintain his sense of Protestant, like, a distinct identity within he has a certain position, he has to be highly critical of the Catholic bishop. And the Catholic bishop, to in order to maintain his sort of position within Catholic order, has to be highly critical of the Protestant or the Orthodox bishop, right? So it's the same thing within Islam. It's where the mullahs, the Shia mullahs and the Sunni mullahs, in order to maintain their sort of seat of power, their seat of influence, they have to emphasize their interpretive tradition over and against even the first principle of the religion itself that are shared. And so on both sides, you have these hypocritical extremes that are not actually serving the civilizational telos or civilizational values, or participating in the civilizational first principles. They're actually hypocrites lying outside, and those elements tend to cooperate because with other civilizations. For example, the CIA has this ability, they basically admit this publicly now. The whole kind of strategy in foreign countries is to go in, and they probably, once they've done it all over the world, there's nothing to keep them from doing it within the country also, is that they go to like any country, and they find the corrupt elements within it. And this is what corruption is: it's the hypocritical elements within a country or within a civilization. They go to those corrupt elements, and they basically give them pragmatic advantages like money, entry into universities in the West for their children, whatever they want, basically money, let's say, to carry out the agenda of the CIA within the country, right? So Imran Khan being removed from politics in Pakistan recently was a CIA operation. It's come out recently, right? Or the coup in Iran of the Shah, and then also the Iranian Revolution to some degree was facilitated by the CIA. And so you do have these elements, right? And so just because you have intra-civilizational conflict, and you also have this phenomena of civilizations or elements that are apparently within one civilization aiding on like the dominant civilization on the globe, or one of the dominant civilizations on the globe, against participants in its own civilization, doesn't mean necessarily that Huntington's model is false. It just means that those type of elements exist, those sort of hypocritical elements exist. And for example, if we take Saudi Arabia, right? So Saudi Arabia used to, on the idealistic front, have this sort of propaganda where Christians and Muslims and Jews, especially American Christians, should get along, because there's a sort of Protestantism that Saudi Islam is founded upon, and there's a sort of Protestantism that America is founded upon, right? And so there is this strong idealistic sort of dialogue about how Saudi Arabia, or Muslims and Christians, should get along and be on the same side. But pragmatically, it was because Anglo-Protestant civilization has been the dominant civilization on Earth for the last at least 100 years, right? So it's really, right, there's people who are hypocrites, who are only going for their own self-interest. They're using kind of the idealistic, like the king bishop thing, where the king uses the bishop to pacify the masses, like the opium of the masses type religion. That's what Saudi Arabia was doing. But what you see now is, as soon as we have this emergence of a multipolar world, right? We have this emergence where America can't like dominate the world anymore. Anglo-Protestant civilization can't dominate the world anymore. Liberalism coming to its extreme conclusions is basically eroding this civilization from within. What you have is, you have Russia rising, you have China rising, and as this multipolar world emerges, you see Saudi Arabia all of a sudden, it's no longer firmly in the American camp, right? It's starting to build different geopolitical alliances, and when it started to, the Abraham Accord happened, there's all these moves by the Saudi government, both before and after, to facilitate that and to kind of side with the American establishment and try to normalize Israel. But then once they figured out that American dominance was over, that America could enforce this agenda through, that other powers were a significant counterweight to America. Now, what you see is the Saudi, the king MBS or the prince. He's building a multilateral, multipolar sort of dynamic for Saudi Arabia, right? Because it's the whole idealistic religious dialogue of Muslims and Christians being closer to each other has gone away, right? That sort of dialogue the idealistic dialogue has gone away. So again, I just wanted to explain that, like, this fact that elements within one civilization who are willing to side with the interests of a foreign dominant civilization, or the fact that there's intra-civilizational conflict, doesn't negate the fact that these civilizations exist and Huntington's model is valid. And the other thing I want to say is, I feel like this civilization is sort of a simplification. I feel like there's these organizational units that go down. So there's like meta civilizations and sub civilizations, and there's also traditions, which is like a subunit of a civilization. So for example, in Islamic civilization, there's three major interpretive traditions. There's the Sunni, there's the Shia, and there's the Muhakkima. These are three major interpretive traditions, and each one is a sort of sub-civilization. And so just like you have conflicts between, like, let's say, Anglo-Protestant civilization and Slavic Orthodox civilization, on that scale, you can also have conflicts within, like, the Shia tradition versus the Sunni tradition, and it's the same type of thing. It might be on a smaller subunit, or it might be on a smaller scale, but it's the exact same type of thing. It's not a different type of thing. So when we say inter-civilizational conflict and intra-civilizational conflict, it's kind of relative, right? So it just goes back to, for example, you can also say Christendom. So Christendom might be a meta-civilization that's inclusive of Oriental Orthodoxy all the way to Anglo-Protestant charismatic civilization. And if there's conflict between, like, Russia and America, that in some ways is intra-meta civilizational conflict, right? So it's not a different type of thing when you have these sort of conflicts. It's just there's more pixelation and more nuance that's possible to understanding Huntington's model. And I feel like this sort of understanding of the idealistic and pragmatic polarity within civilizations, and the hypocrisy that exists on the extremes, outside of the limits of the civilization, but apparently within it, and this understanding that there's sub-civilizations and sub-civilizations and meta-civilizations, these two understandings really clarify Huntington's model and how it's still valid. Anyways, that's it for now.